You think you know someone, truly know them, the way they smile when they're happy, the way they frown when they're not. You believe you understand their quirks, their insecurities, their heart. But sometimes you don't. It began with a simple conversation. My wife of 6 years casually mentioned over dinner that she wanted to get her boobs done. I was taken aback, not because I didn't think she was stunning as she was, but because it seemed so sudden, out of character. I remember asking her why. You're perfect the way you are. Her response was vague, something about wanting to feel more confident, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't press her. I trusted her. Isn't that what love is? Trust? But trust has a funny way of crumbling when you're not paying attention. I found myself restless in the middle of the night. I turned over to Olivia's side of the bed, expecting to see her, but it was empty. Where could she have gone at this hour? I got up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and wandered into the living room. There she was, asleep on the couch, curled up with a blanket. Her phone lay on the floor next to her, its screen lighting up the dark room every few seconds. She looked peaceful, her breathing steady, and for a moment I thought about leaving her there. Then her phone buzzed, and buzzed again. I sighed, thinking it might disturb her sleep. She must have nodded off while using it, I figured. I bent down, intending to pick it up and put it on silent, maybe help her back to the bedroom. But when I flipped it over, what I saw almost made my heart stop. I wish I hadn't looked. Before that night, I thought my life was perfect. You ever look at someone and think, how did I get so lucky? That's how I felt every time I saw Olivia. She wasn't just my wife, she was the kind of woman who turned heads effortlessly, stunning and naturally radiant. Even after having our daughter and 6 years of marriage, she still had that glow. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the way she carried herself. A quiet confidence that made you feel safe and captivated at the same time. The way she'd hum while cooking dinner, or laugh so freely when our daughter did something silly. It was the kind of love you'd want to bottle up and keep forever. So when she sat across from me one evening and said, I think I want to get my boobs done, it didn't just surprise me, it hurt. I put my coffee mug down, blinking at her like I hadn't heard her right. Why would you even think about that? You're gorgeous, Olivia, just the way you are. She shrugged, still avoiding my gaze. I don't know. I've been thinking about it for a while. It's not about you, it's about me. But it didn't feel like it was about her. There was something else behind her words, something heavier, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I pressed her gently, asking if she was happy or if something had changed, but all she gave me was a thin smile. I just want to feel better about myself, she said. I let it go after that. What else could I do? I didn't want to push her too hard, even though the thought of it unsettled me deeply. For weeks afterward, I convinced myself it was just a phase, something she'd lose interest in eventually. I mean, why wouldn't she? She was perfect to me. She always had been. But love can blind you. You don't see the cracks forming right in front of you because you don't want to. Admitting something is wrong means confronting it, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. That night at the table, that was the first time I felt like I didn't really know my wife. But I had no idea how deep that feeling would eventually go. Not long after that dinner conversation, Olivia made her decision. I still remember the way she told me, so casual, like it was nothing. I've booked the surgery. It's happening next month, she said. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't need to go through with it. But the way she said it, so firm, made it clear that nothing I said would change her mind. So I swallowed my feelings and told her, if this is what you want, I'll support you. When the day of the surgery came, I was there, holding her hand in the waiting room. I told myself this was for her, that I was being a good husband by standing by her side. But deep down, something felt off. Like this wasn't really just about her confidence. After the surgery, things began to change. Slowly at first, so subtly that I barely noticed. She started dressing differently, tighter tops, shorter skirts, outfits that seemed designed to attract attention in ways she never had before. At first, I thought she was just thrilled with the results, enjoying the newfound confidence she'd been looking for. But then came the late nights on her phone. She'd sit on the couch, scrolling or typing, her screen lighting up her face. When I asked who she was texting, she'd brush it off. Just a friend, she'd say. Or sometimes she'd laugh and add, "It's Martha, you know how crazy she can be." Martha was her friend, and they had a thing for staying up late, chatting, and watching their favorite shows on E! Olivia always shared snippets of their silly conversations with me. But this was different. Very different. She'd angle the phone away from me, shielding it like it contained secrets she didn't want me to see. And then there were the unexplained outings. "I'm meeting some friends," she'd say, or "I need some time to myself." At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs space, right? A few weeks later, I found myself awake in the middle of the night, restless. I turned over to Olivia's side of the bed, expecting to find her there, but it was empty. Where could she have gone at this hour? I got up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and wandered into the living room. There she was, asleep on the couch, curled up with a blanket. Her phone lay on the floor next to her, its screen lighting up the dark room every few seconds. She looked so peaceful, her breathing steady. For a moment, I thought about just leaving her there. Then her phone buzzed again, and again. I sighed, thinking it might be disturbing her sleep. She must have nodded off while using it, I figured. I bent down, intending to pick it up and put it on silent, maybe help her back to the bedroom. But when I flipped it over, what I saw almost made my heart stop. A message popped up on the lock screen. "I can't stop thinking about how perfect they feel in my hands. I need more of you." My hands froze mid-motion. The words stared back at me, mocking, taunting. For a second, I convinced myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe I read it wrong, or it wasn't meant for her. But the phone buzzed again, and this time it was worse. A preview of an image attached to the next message appeared. A photo of Olivia. My Olivia. Dressed in nothing but lace, her new boobs front and center. My chest tightened, and my breath caught in my throat. I unlocked the phone without even thinking, and what I saw next confirmed every fear I didn't even realize I had. There was a long thread of messages, flirty, explicit, shameless, photos of her post-surgery body, angles I'd never seen before, sent to someone I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to see you again. You're the only one who makes me feel alive." It wasn't just the pictures, it was the words, the tone. She wasn't just sharing her body, she was sharing her emotions, her intimacy. I stared at her, sleeping so peacefully, as if nothing was wrong, as if she wasn't tearing our life apart with every text she sent to this stranger. My hands shook as I placed the phone back on the floor, careful not to make a sound. I couldn't wake her. Not now. I stood there, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Was the surgery really for her, or had it always been for him? My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the truth. I didn't know my wife at all anymore. I stood there, frozen, staring at the cascade of messages and images that shattered every illusion I had about my wife. It wasn't just casual banter or harmless flirting. This was something deeper, something planned and deliberate. The words on the screen painted a picture far darker than I could have imagined. He complimented her new boobs, describing in detail how perfect they felt, and she responded with a kind of eagerness and excitement that left me gutted. "They're just for you," she wrote, her words clawing at my chest like shards of glass. My mind reeled. Those boobs, her boobs, were supposed to be ours. I loved her body the way it was, every curve, every imperfection. She told me the surgery was for her confidence, for herself. But here it was laid bare. They weren't for her. They weren't for me. They were for him. I felt anger rise, hot and unrelenting, but it tangled with something deeper, disbelief, heartbreak. How could she do this to me, to us, to our family? My hands trembled as I put her phone back on the floor, careful not to wake her. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed to think. I needed to know everything. In the days that followed, I became someone I barely recognized. A detective in my own marriage, piecing together her deceit like fragments of a shattered vase. It started small, watching her more closely, taking mental notes. Every time she left the house, I found myself asking silent questions. Has she gone to meet her AP again? Why is Olivia doing this? Even at work, I couldn't believe Olivia was actually in the office. The things I saw in that thread of chat that day left me broken. But I wanted to catch them together and call her out immediately. This was just too much. Taking money from our joint account to get breast surgery for another man, and I was there throughout the entire process, offering support. No, I couldn't take this. There were other things, too. New lingerie I'd never seen her wear for me, sudden changes in her schedule, a distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Each clue was like a nail in the coffin of the life I thought we had. I started following her when she left the house. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to catch her red-handed and confront her on the spot. I wanted to see the look in her eyes when I caught her. One night, she told me she was meeting her friends for drinks. I watched her leave, her smile tight and practiced, her eyes avoiding mine as I responded, "All right, honey, have fun." My own words felt like a bitter pill to swallow. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and slipping out the door. I stayed far enough behind that she wouldn't notice, my heart pounding with every turn she made. When she didn't head toward the usual spots, I felt the first prick of cold confirmation. She wasn't meeting friends. She wasn't even heading toward the city. Instead, she drove toward a quiet, secluded part of town. I followed her all the way to a park, watching as she pulled into a near-empty lot. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her coat and glancing around nervously before walking into the shadows. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I sat there, my mind racing. She wasn't alone. There was no mistaking what this was. And that's when I knew. The truth wasn't just in her phone or her behavior. It was here, in the cold night air, in the actions she thought I'd never see. The park was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. From the shadows, I saw her, Olivia, walking toward him. A tall man stepped out from the shadows, his stance confident, his presence nauseatingly familiar, though I didn't know him. They didn't waste a second. He pulled her into his arms, and she melted into him, their embrace more intimate than anything she'd shown me in months. My chest tightened as I watched his hands move to her boobs, the ones I had adored just as they were. He caressed them as though they belonged to him, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh softly. And then they moved, slipping further into the darkness, into a secluded corner where they thought no one could see. I gripped the door handle of my car, torn between fury and devastation. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to rush over there, to rip them apart. But another part of me hesitated. Should I confront them now or document this betrayal? Undeniable proof for when she tried to lie her way out of it. But then he touched her again, his hand tracing her body in ways that sent waves of rage through me. The decision was made. I stepped out of the car, slamming the door louder than I intended. The sound echoed in the empty park, and they froze. Her name escaped my lips like a thunderclap. Olivia! She whipped around, her face a mask of terror. He turned, trying to size me up, his expression caught between surprise and arrogance. For a moment, no one moved. Then he had the audacity to smirk, his confidence returning as he stepped in front of her, as if shielding her from me. "Look, man," he started, his tone cool, dismissive. "I don't think this is what it looks like." "Shut up," I snapped, my voice low and trembling with rage. My eyes were locked on Olivia, who stood there frozen, her lips parted as if searching for an excuse. "Don't you dare try to lie to me," I growled, taking a step closer. "I've seen the texts, the pictures. I know everything. And now, this." I gestured toward the two of them, my hand shaking. "In a park, Olivia? You couldn't even respect yourself or me enough to take this to a hotel? This is how little you care. How little he cares," she stammered, her voice breaking. "Edward, I can explain." "Explain?" I barked, cutting her off. "Explain what? That you've been sneaking around with this piece of trash, sending him pictures of the body I loved while lying to my face? That you let him touch you like that out here in the dark, like someone's cheap secret?" She looked at the ground, tears pooling in her eyes, but I wasn't finished. "And you," I said, turning to him, my voice venomous. "You're touching another man's wife in a public park like some kind of animal. Is this how little she means to you, or do you just enjoy humiliating her?" His smirk faltered, replaced by something closer to unease. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off again. "You don't get to talk. Neither of you do. I've said all I need to say." I looked back at Olivia, who now stood there trembling, her tears falling silently. "I loved you. I fought for you. And this is how you repay me?" My voice cracked, and for a moment the anger gave way to the unbearable weight of heartbreak. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the shadows. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the cold night air, each step a painful reminder of what I had just lost. I left them there, standing in the dark, their betrayal laid bare under the cold night sky. My chest felt hollow, but my resolve was unshakable. By the time I got home, my mind was already made up. I didn't say a word to her. She wasn't there yet, but I knew she would come crawling back eventually, with her half-hearted apologies and crocodile tears. I wasn't going to wait for that. I packed a bag for myself and then another for our daughter. It was surreal, folding little shirts, grabbing her favorite stuffed animal, while my world crumbled around me. My hands trembled as I wrote the note, each word cutting through me like glass. Olivia, you have destroyed everything. A cheat like you will never come near our daughter again. When she is old enough, I will tell her exactly who you are and what you've done. If you have a problem with this, take me to court. I have evidence of everything. Don't forget that. I left the note on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it the moment she walked in. With my daughter asleep in the car, I drove to my parents' house. It was late, too late to show up unannounced, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. When I arrived, my mom opened the door, her face etched with concern. She didn't ask any questions, just took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I carried my daughter inside, laid her down in the guest room, and sat in the living room, staring at nothing. The anger, the humiliation, the heartbreak, it all came crashing down. I felt like a failure as a husband, betrayed in the most intimate way possible. The woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, had made a mockery of everything we'd built together. What hurt the most wasn't just the affair, it was the realization that she'd chosen this path, knowing the pain it would cause. She didn't care about our family, about me, about the life we'd built. And for what? For a cheap thrill with a man who didn't even respect her enough to treat her with dignity? I wrestled with the urge to scream, to cry, to drive back and confront her again. But I knew that wouldn't fix anything. The damage was done. Now all I could do was figure out how to move forward, for myself and for my daughter. Betrayal has a way of breaking you in ways you didn't think possible. Sitting here now, looking back on everything, I can't help but wonder, if I hadn't picked up her phone that night, would I still be living a lie? Would I have been better off not knowing? What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you have gone through the phone? Would you have confronted her immediately or walked away as I did? Betrayal isn't just about the act itself, it's about the ripple effect it creates, tearing through trust, love, and everything you thought you knew. How would you handle it? Could you forgive, or would you leave like I did?